For several years, my wife and I were inseparable from another couple who lived right across the street from us. They weren't just neighbors. They were family. My best friend, I'll call him Mark, and his wife, Sarah, had kids the same age as ours. All 4 kids were close. We spent an absurd amount of time together. Dinners multiple nights a week. Weekends. Vacations. Holidays. Birthdays. School events. Mark was like a brother to me. And my wife and Sarah were incredibly close as well. We trusted each other completely. That's why what happened next destroyed everything. 5 months ago, I discovered that my wife was having an affair with Mark, my best friend, the man whose house I could see from my front window. And I found out entirely by accident. One afternoon, my wife left her email open on our shared computer. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I just happened to walk by and noticed an email on the screen. It was addressed to her therapist. What caught my eye was a single line. She mentioned that Mark would be joining her at an upcoming therapy session. Again. My heart dropped. I stood there staring at the screen, trying to come up with any explanation that made sense. Why would my best friend be attending my wife's therapy sessions? And why would I not know about it? I started searching through her email. What I found made my hands shake. There were multiple emails back and forth with the therapist. Dates. Scheduling. References to conversations they'd already had together. It became clear that Mark had been attending joint therapy sessions with my wife for about 6 weeks. Behind my back. Still hoping, desperately, that there was some explanation I was missing, I checked our mobile phone account. That's when everything collapsed. Since late summer, my wife and Mark had been texting each other constantly. Hundreds of messages every single day. By the holidays, it was nearly 500 texts per day. 500 per day. And that wasn't even the worst part. That Thanksgiving and Christmas, my wife and I hosted both of our families. Parents. Siblings. Everyone. And Mark and Sarah joined us as well, either for dinner or shortly after. We were all in the same house, celebrating together. The phone records showed that the entire time they were there, while we were laughing, eating, talking, my wife and Mark were texting each other across the room. They did that almost every time the 4 of us were together. 4 months. And what hurts the most is this. They did it while Sarah and I were sitting right there. I confronted my wife. I showed her the emails. The texts. The records. She didn't deny it. She told me that yes, she and Mark had fallen in love. She said, it just happened. I don't know how. But I love him, and I don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm sorry. I remember lying face down on the couch, unable to look at her, as she explained everything. They had gone on a school district trip together. Something had happened in her hotel room. And after that, things escalated quickly. She told me they had already made plans to divorce both me and Sarah. They weren't going to move in together right away because of the kids, but eventually, that was the plan. As for the therapy sessions, according to her, those were mostly about figuring out how to break the news to me and Sarah as gently as possible. Because they were just so concerned about our well-being. Sarah and I don't believe that for a second. We're pretty sure they were never planning to tell us about the affair at all. They were just going to discover their feelings for each other later, once they'd come up with a more convenient reason to end their marriages. 2 months ago, my wife moved out. I was, and honestly, still am, completely destroyed. I cry every day. I cried writing this. I worry constantly about what this is doing to our kids. About how this will shape them. But I'm also not the kind of person who just shrinks away when I'm wronged. And I was wronged. Objectively. Deeply. A couple of years earlier, Mark had run for a seat on the local board of education. He was a long shot. Almost nobody thought he'd win. I helped him anyway. I worked on his campaign materials. Helped him prepare for debates. My wife, who was a well-known employee in the school district, helped spread the word. Against all odds, he won. Barely. By a few dozen votes. Winning that seat became the center of Mark's entire world. He joined every committee he could. Attended every meeting. Every event. Every function. And that position, that role, became the foundation of his affair with my wife. They were constantly together. School meetings in the evenings. Events on weekends. Trips. Committees. Always together. After I discovered the affair, my grief turned into something else. Anger. And then clarity. It occurred to me that an extramarital affair between a member of the Board of Education and a school district employee wasn't just morally disgusting, it was politically disastrous. And possibly a violation of district policy. It got worse. My wife was in line for an open administrative position within the district. Everyone knew it. She was practically guaranteed the job, along with a significant pay raise. She had just completed her master's degree in school administration. At the urging of her principal and the superintendent, specifically so she could be promoted into this role. And now I had proof. Texts from both of them openly admitting to the affair. Phone records showing the sheer volume of communication. Emails involving the therapist. I thought about sending everything directly to the board and the superintendent. But I knew how it would look. A betrayed husband. Emotional. Angry. Seeking revenge. Not exactly a credible source. So instead, I came up with a different plan. I knew I had the evidence. What I needed now was leverage. I didn't want to storm into a meeting waving screenshots and screaming accusations. That would only make me look unstable. Emotional. Easy to dismiss. So instead, I created a problem they couldn't ignore. I invented a person. A furious friend. Someone who supposedly knew everything about the affair and was planning to show up at the next Board of Education meeting and publicly expose both of them. Loudly. In front of parents, teachers, administrators, everyone. I told my wife about this friend. I said I had tried to calm him down. I said I wasn't sure I could stop him. I could see the fear in her eyes immediately. Word got to Mark. And Mark panicked. Because he understood something very clearly. If this came out publicly, on record, in front of the board, his career, or at least the one thing he cared most about, was over. So he made a decision. He went to the superintendent and voluntarily confessed to the affair. Within days, the superintendent strongly recommended that Mark resign from the Board of Education. And he did. Just like that, the position he had fought so hard for, the role that had become his identity, was gone. Sarah later told me he was completely crushed. Humiliated. Barely able to get out of bed for days. But the fallout didn't stop there. Once news of the affair and Mark's resignation started circulating, the superintendent, who was a longtime friend of both my wife and Mark, reached out to my wife. He was emotional. Tearful. And then he told her the truth. It was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted into an administrative role within the district. The job she had been virtually guaranteed? Gone. The position was later filled by an outside candidate. This sent shockwaves through the district. Everyone knew she was getting that job. Everyone. The rumors spread immediately. Whispers. Questions. Side glances. The day after she was told she wouldn't be promoted, my wife and I, despite everything, took our son out to breakfast for his birthday. We were sitting there together when a parent from the district approached our table. She congratulated my wife on her new role. My wife smiled, said thank you, then excused herself and went to cry in the bathroom. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I waited a couple of weeks. Long enough for the damage to settle. Long enough for reality to sink in. Then, right before my wife moved out, I told them the truth. There was never a furious friend. No anonymous tipster. No outside threat. It was just me. All of it. Word traveled fast after that. We live in a fairly small town. Mark grew up here. My wife had worked in the school district for nearly 20 years. My wife refuses to talk to me about how things are at work now, but I've heard from people I know that her once spotless reputation has taken a serious hit. As for Mark, he disappeared. This was a man who used to be everywhere. Neighborhood gatherings. Local pubs. Community events. Now he barely comes outside. Occasionally, he mows his lawn. He's moving out soon, into a small, run-down townhouse. It's all he can afford after factoring in the child support he'll be paying Sarah. They still claim they're trying to make things work together. After everything. After the humiliation. After the fallout. I wish them luck with that. Because it's going to be a long life, showing their faces together in this town. In a town like ours, things don't stay secret for long. People talk. They connect dots. They remember who you were, and they notice who you've become. Mark used to be everywhere. He was loud. Social. The kind of guy who thrived on attention. After everything came out, that version of him vanished. He stopped showing up. Stopped drinking at the local pubs. Stopped socializing. Most days, the only time anyone sees him is when he steps outside to mow the lawn. Head down, moving quickly, like he doesn't want to be seen. Sarah and I still talk. No, we're not together. People ask that all the time. What we are is something simpler, and honestly, more important. We're friends. We're the only two people who went through this exact betrayal, by the same two people, at the same time. We leaned on each other when everything fell apart. Without that, I don't know how either of us would have gotten through it. Once Mark finally moves out, we plan to let the kids spend more time together again. They deserve that much, at least. As for my wife. We're still technically married, though not for much longer. Divorce mediation takes time. Paperwork takes time. Emotionally, though, it's been over for a while. She doesn't talk to me about work anymore. But I hear things. I hear that people look at her differently now. That the trust she spent nearly 2 decades building is fractured. Not destroyed. But cracked. She'll probably leave the district eventually. Start over somewhere new. She has the qualifications, and she'll get good recommendations. But she'll be leaving behind a reputation that used to be spotless. And she knows why. Mark and my wife insist they're still trying to make things work between them. Despite everything. Despite the public humiliation. Despite the damage to their families. Despite the looks they get when they're seen together. I don't envy that future. Revenge didn't make me happy. It didn't fix my marriage. It didn't undo the damage to our kids. It didn't stop the nights where the house feels unbearably quiet. But it did one thing. It restored a sense of balance. They didn't get to quietly walk away and rewrite the story. They didn't get promotions, applause, and fresh starts while the people they betrayed were left picking up the pieces. Actions had consequences. And they had to live with them. Years later. It's strange to look back at all of this now. When I first lived through it, I was a complete mess. I could barely function. I was angry, grieving, and completely lost. Years have passed since then. I'm not that person anymore. Life moved on, slowly at first, then all at once. I dated. I stumbled. I healed in ways I didn't even realize were happening at the time. Eventually, something that started as, "this is fun," turned into, "wait a minute, this is real. I'm okay now." As okay as anyone can be these days. What still surprises me is how this story refuses to die. Years later, people still reach out. Still ask how things turned out. Somehow, it even made its way beyond Reddit. That's fine. Because when I read this story now, I don't see revenge anymore. I see survival. I see a man who was betrayed in the worst possible way, and who refused to disappear quietly. And most of all, I'm grateful that I'm no longer him.